I read the ultimatum aloud to the human envoy myself, and I watched her not blink. And even then, I did not understand that I had just started the clock on my own world's death. She stood in the receiving hall of the Concord cruiser, 10,000 eyes with one will, a small soft thing in a gray uniform with no rank I could read, and I, Voss Kareth, third herald of the Outer Reach, delivered the words the High Muster had written for her. 12 days. Earth would dismantle its border fleets, surrender the orbital yards above its moon, and accept a Concord prefect in its highest seat, or the muster would come. I had delivered 91 such ultimatums in my service, in 91 receiving halls, to 91 leaders who had heard the count and done the arithmetic and arrived, every one of them, at the only sum the arithmetic allowed. 91 worlds had knelt. Not one had needed the 12 days. They had knelt before the deadline, because the deadline was a courtesy and the count was the weapon, and a leader who can count knows the answer the moment the herald stops speaking. I expected the 92nd. You have heard the terms, I said, in the trade cant we used for lesser species. You have 12 of your days. The muster does not negotiate the count. The muster does not extend it. Do you understand what you have been given? She looked at me for a long moment. She had brown eyes, flat and tired, the eyes of someone who had not slept enough and did not expect to. I understand the count, she said. I'll carry it home. But I want to be clear with you, Herald, because I think you're an honest creature, so I'll do you the honor. We're not going to kneel. And I don't think you should send the muster. I had heard defiance before. The first words of a kneeling world are almost always brave. I let her have it. Then your world chooses the muster, I said. I am sorry for you. I will record that you understood. Record this too, she said. 12 days is generous. We won't need them. If you send the muster, we'll answer faster than your count. I marked it as bravado. That was my first mistake. There would be others, and each one would cost more than the last, and the final one would cost everything, but they all grew from that first soft moment when I wrote down her words and did not believe a single one of them. She left on her little courier, a stub thing that should not have survived its own jump field, and our scopes watched it go until it folded out of the system, and the muster officers around me laughed the dry clicking laugh of our kind and called the humans a curiosity, a noise, a world that had not yet learned its size. I laughed with them. I was good at my work. I believed, as all heralds believe, that the count was the weapon, that the threat of the muster did the conquering, and the muster itself was only the rare grim chore for worlds too stupid to do the arithmetic. The Outer Reach Concord ruled 406 worlds. That was the number we carried like a hymn. 406 worlds, 11 client species, and the muster, the standing war host that had never, in 19,000 years, met a fleet it could not bury under its own hulls. The muster's doctrine was older than my bloodline and simpler than a stone. We did not win battles. We ended them by weight. When a world refused, we sent enough ships that the question of skill became irrelevant. 1,000 against 10, 10,000 against 100. We did not need our gunners to be better than yours. We needed only to be more, and we were always, always more. So when the count ran down and Earth's deadline came and went with no signal of surrender, the High Muster gathered the host, and I was ordered to attend the staging as the herald of record, to witness and to log, so that the 407th world's submission would be properly entered into the rolls. I want to tell you the size of what we gathered, because the size is the whole of it. The size is the reason none of us were afraid. We mustered 11,400 warships above the staging world of Reth, where the Concord kept its deepest yards. 11,400. Line dreadnoughts a kilometer down the keel. Swarm tenders that berthed drone shoals by the hundred. Anchor ships whose gravity wells could drag a moon. The host filled the sky of Hreth from edge to edge until the staging world had no night, only the cold, steady glow of 11,000 engine banks holding station, and I stood on the observation gallery of the flag anchor and looked out at it and felt the old certainty settle into my bones like warmth. 11,400 ships. For one world, for one soft gray world that had told me through a tired-eyed envoy that 12 days was generous. Excessive, said the muster lord beside me, and there was humor in it. His name was Dagon Sir, and he had ended 40 worlds, and he wore the ending of each of them as a notch in the bone plate of his collar. We could take their little world with a tenth of this. The High Muster wishes a demonstration. The other clients have grown talkative this past year. A border world that mocks our count, erased by the full weight of the reach. That is a lesson the talkers will hear for a generation. They said they would answer in 9 days, I told him. I do not know why I said it. The envoy's words had stayed in me like a splinter I could not find to pull. Their count, not ours. 9 days, not 12. Dagon Sir clicked his amusement. Then they are 4 days late already, Herald, and we are here, and they are not. Log it. The soft world declined the count. The muster proceeds. Begin the fold. I logged it. The whole host began to fold. 11,400 hulls bending the dark in a wave, the largest single muster the Reach had assembled in 2 centuries, and I stood at the gallery glass and watched the stars smear and thought, with the small pride of a creature who has done his duty exactly right. There is no fleet in the galaxy that can stand against this. There is no weapon. There is no world. I was correct that there was no fleet. I had simply asked the wrong question. We came out of the fold one jump short of Earth. At the dead system, the charts called Marin's Lantern, a burned-out star with nothing in its court, but ice in the dark, the standard staging point for a final approach, a place to dress the lines and let the swarm tenders spool their shoals before. The last fold to the target. Standard, doctrine, 19,000 years of it. We had done this above 100 worlds, and 100 worlds had watched us come and known their hour had arrived. The host bled out of the fold in waves, hull after hull blooming into real space, and the scope tenders began the slow work of dressing the formation, and I went to the gallery to log the order of battle, and the dead system was quiet and cold and exactly as the charts promised, and for 11 minutes everything was as it had always been. Then the scopes found the thing waiting for us, and the first officer who saw it did not call it a ship. He called it a moon. He logged it as a stellar body, an uncharted mass, a piece of the dead system the old surveys had missed, because his instruments told him it was 1.5 kilometers long and 40,000 years cold. And it was sitting in the dark between us and Earth, alone, and nothing alone is ever a threat to 11,400 ships. Anomalous mass forward of the line, the scope tender reported, bored. Reads as a captured body. Iron heavy, no emissions, likely a derelict or a moon fragment, routing around it. It's in our lane, said Dagon Sir, not even turning. Tell the Vanguard to clear it. If it's a derelict, log it for salvage after. If it's a rock, push it aside. The Vanguard angled toward it. 40 line dreadnoughts, the spearhead of the host, the ships that had broken open more worlds than I could name. They moved on the dead cold mass in the standard wedge, weapons cold, expecting iron and ice. And the dead cold mass opened a single light along its flank, one long seam of white that ran the whole 1.5 kilometers of its length, like an eye that had been closed for 40,000 years deciding at last to open. And every emission sensor in the host screamed at once, and the bored scope tender stopped being bored, and somewhere under my collar plates a cold thing woke that I would not learn the name of for 9 days, though by then I would know it well, because by then it would be the only thing left in my world. It was not a moon, it was waiting. The thing in the dark spoke before it moved, and that was the first wrongness, because nothing speaks to a host of 11,400. A host of that size is not a thing you negotiate with. It is weather. It is the end of a season. You do not hail the tide. The hail came across the Conquered command band, our encryption, our private channel that no client species had ever broken in 19,000 years, and it came in trade cant, slow and clear, in a voice I knew. It was the tired-eyed envoy, the small gray woman I had read the count to. She had carried it home, exactly as she promised, and now her voice filled the flag anchor's bridge as if she were standing in it. Conquered host, she said. This is the Terran ship's sundering line. You came on your own count, 4 days late by ours. We told the Herald 12 days was generous. Here is the offer your own doctrine entitles you to, the one you give the worlds you visit. Turn around, fold home, do not approach Earth. This is the only time I will say it. After this, I stop talking, and the ship starts working. Dagon Sir laughed. The whole bridge laughed, the dry-clicking cascade of our kind. 11,400 ships worth of contempt in one cruiser's command deck. One ship, 1.5 kilometers long, alone in a dead system, was offering terms of surrender to the largest muster the Reach had raised in 200 years. You will find, Dagon Sir said into the band, still amused, that a count of 1 is not a count at all. We are 11,400. You are a single hull. Hold your station, and we will take you intact for the archives. Run, and we will take you in pieces. Those are the offers your size entitles you to, human. A pause. Then the woman's voice, flat and tired and entirely without fear. You misunderstood me, Muster Lord. I wasn't offering you surrender. I was offering you a head start. You declined. Sundering line, all stations, the host has declined, begin. And the dead cold mass that was not a moon turned its long white seam toward the host and began to work. I have served the muster 40 years. I have logged the breaking of worlds. I know what a fleet's weapons look like. The cone of fire, the lance of energy, the slow grinding exchange where 2 hosts batter each other until one has fewer hulls and the other claims the world. I know war by weight. I expected, when the human ship began, to see it fight the way a cornered thing fights. Brave brief swallowed. It did not fight that way. It did not fight at all by any meaning of the word I owned. It began to subtract. The first thing it did was reach across 40,000 kilometers of dead space and touch the Vanguard, the 40-line dreadnoughts of the spearhead, and the touch was a single sweep of that white seam, one pass of light across the dark, and when the light passed, the vanguard was not damaged. The vanguard was not there. 40-line dreadnoughts, 400,000 crew, the ships that had broken 100 worlds, gone in the space of a held breath, not shattered, not burning, simply subtracted from the count, as if a hand had reached into the ledger and erased a line. The scope tender's voice came out very small. Vanguard is? The vanguard is gone, Muster Lord. All 40. No wreckage. No survivors. No, there's nothing there. Sensor fault, Dagansir said. His amusement had a crack in it now. The first crack, the first of so many. Recheck. A vanguard does not vanish. Reposition the spearhead and recheck. There was no spearhead to reposition. That was the thing the scope tender was trying to say and could not make his throat say. The 40 were not out of contact. They were out of existence. And the host, 11,400 strong, hung in the dead system around the one cold ship and began, for the first time in any of our lifetimes, to understand that the arithmetic had changed and not in our favor. The human ship turned the white seam again. The second sweep took the anchor flank, the gravity ships, the great slow vessels whose wells could drag a moon. They were our siege weapons, the ones that pinned a fleet in place so the weight could fall on it. 200 anchor ships. The sweep crossed them and 200 lines vanished from the ledger, and this time I was watching the gallery glass directly, and I saw it, and I will tell you exactly what I saw, because no one believed me after, and I have stopped caring whether they do. I saw the ship not fire. There was no lance, no beam, no cone of fire crossing the dark. There was only the seam of white opening wider, and a sound that the hull sensors translated into the audible band as a single low note, almost gentle, like a long breath let out. And where the note touched our ships stopped being. The anchor flank did not explode. It was unmade. The ship, 1.5 kilometers long, was reaching out into the host and turning our hulls into the same dark they hung in, and it was doing it at the pace of a creature that had nowhere in particular to be. 11,160, I heard myself say. I was the herald of record. Counting was my function. The host had been 11,400. The vanguard and the anchor flank were gone. 11,160 remained, and I logged the number, and even as I logged it, I knew it was already wrong. Dagon Sir found his voice, and it was the voice of doctrine. The voice that had never failed because it had never been tested against this. All hulls, full muster fire, concentrate on the single contact, bury it. We are 11,000, it is one. Bury it under everything we have now. And the host obeyed. Because the host was the finest war machine the Reach had ever built, and it did exactly what 19,000 years had taught it to do. 11,160 warships fired on one hull. I want you to imagine that. I had imagined it in the half-second before they fired, and what I imagined was the cold ship erased, vaporized, turned to a smear of light by a weight of fire that no object in the universe could survive. That is what weight is for. That is the whole of our doctrine. There is no skill that beats enough. There is no hull that survives everything. The fire reached the human ship. The human ship was still there. I saw the storm of it hit. Every lance and shell and beam in the host converging on a single point in the dark, light so dense it whited out the gallery glass, and the scope tenders flinched back from their stations. And when the light faded, the cold ship hung exactly where it had been, the long white seam still open, the 1.5 kilometers of weathered iron hull marked with scorch and old salvage scars, and not one new wound, and across the command band, calm and tired, the woman's voice said, "That was your weight. Now you've spent it. Sundering line, resume." And it resumed. It was at this moment, I think, not the vanguard, not the anchor flank, but this, the moment the full muster fire of the outer Reach broke against a single hull and did nothing, that the certainty went out of the host. You could feel it. 11,000 ships had been weather, had been the tide, had been the end of a world season, and in the space of one absorbed broadside, they became 11,000 frightened crews, realizing all at once that the thing in the dark with them was not a ship they had cornered. They were the thing it had cornered. They had folded into a dead system on their own count, 4 days late, and the only ship that had been waiting for them was the one they could not touch. 11,160, I logged again, because it was still, for one more moment, true. Then the white seam swept a third time, and it stopped being true, and it would never be true again. And somewhere far behind us, 406 worlds slept under the certainty of the Reach, not knowing that the certainty had just died in a dead system, and that the herald who had carried their count to the soft gray world was watching it die through a sheet of gallery glass, counting down, ship by ship, the end of everything he had ever believed. I have left out a thing in the telling because for years I could not say it, and a herald who leaves out a thing for fear is no herald at all, so I will say it now in its place. between the weight that failed and the swarm that failed, because it belongs there and I owe it the telling. Between the moment the host's full weight broke against the cold hull and did nothing, and the moment Dagon Sur ordered the swarm, there was an interval. And in that interval, the muster tried the last thing the doctrine kept in reserve for a ship that could not be buried under. Fire. We tried to take it, not destroy it, board it, seize it, put our crews aboard the 1.5 kilometers of weathered iron and turn its own. Impossible hull against the world that built it. It was the doctrine's final answer to a thing the weight could not crack. If you cannot break the hull, take the hull, and 1,000 boarding craft launched from the surviving host, 10,000 of our finest, the war cast his boarders, crossing the dead dark toward the seam of white light. I watched them go. I logged them 1,000 craft, 10,000 crew, and I believe with the last belief I had left that this would be the thing. A hull is only a hull. Get inside it and the white seam does not matter. Inside it is corridors and crews and the close brutal work our boarders were bred for. I had seen our boarders take ships that had beaten our fleets. The hull that cannot be broken can still be entered, and what is entered can be taken. The 1,000 craft reached the cold hull, and the cold hull let them land. That was the wrongness again. The same wrongness as letting the host spool its fields. The patience that was not patience but selection. The sundering line did not sweep the boarding craft from the dark. It let them cross. It let them land along the 1.5 kilometers of weathered iron, 1,000 craft clamping to the hull, 10,000 boarders cutting in, and for one breath the scope tenders made the sound again, the almost cheer, because the doctrine was holding, because the boarders were aboard, because a ship that is being boarded is a ship that can be taken. Then the seam of white light which had been along the flank moved. It did not fire. It moved, the whole long seam of it, traveling up and over the hull like an eye rolling in its socket to look at a thing on its own skin, and where the light passed across the hull, it passed across the boarding craft. And the boarding craft were not blasted off and the boarders were not killed in their corridors. They were unmade where they clung. 1,000 craft and 10,000 crew subtracted from the skin of the ship the way the Vanguard had been subtracted from the dark, gone in a single slow pass. And the cold hull was clean again, unmarked, the weathered iron showing not even the scars of where they had cut, as though they had never landed, as though the attempt to take the ship had been erased along with the takers. The woman's voice came across our band, almost gentle, almost sorry. "You can't board it," she said. I should have said, "I'm sorry, that one's worse than the others, 10,000 at once, and I let them land before I'm sorry. There's no inside, Herald. That's the thing your doctrine can't hold. You think it's a hull with corridors and crew, a thing that can be entered and taken, because every ship you've ever met was a hull with corridors and crew. The sundering line isn't a place you can be inside of. It's a thing that happens to whatever's near it. The boarders weren't aboard. There's no aboard. They were just near it, the way your whole host is near it, and near it is where the working reaches. Don't try it again, please. I'd rather not do that one twice." And she did not have to do it twice. The doctrine had nothing left after that. The weight had failed, the boarding had failed, and what remained was the swarm, and then the yield, and then the flight, and then the 4 hulls, and then the long fold home. But I have told you those. I tell you the boarding now only because it was the moment, more than the weight, more than even the afterthought erasure of the 3 last hulls, that I understood the full shape of what the soft gray world had built. Not a stronger ship, not a faster ship, not a ship with a better weapon or a thicker hull or a cleverer crew. A ship that had stopped being a ship in the way we meant the word, a ship that was a law instead of a contender, a thing that did not need an inside because it was not a place, it was a consequence. And you cannot board a consequence. You cannot take a law. You can only stop walking toward it and turn around and fold home, and that was the only answer the dead system ever offered. The only answer it offered my host, and the iron quorum and the choir of Vale, and every confident host that ever did the arithmetic and got it exactly wrong. I logged the boarding last of all the failures, 10,000 of our finest unmade on the skin of a ship that has no skin to stand on, and I carried it home with the rest, and I read it to the Reach with the rest, and the Reach heard it and understood, the way I understood at the gallery glass, that there had never been a way to take the thing in the dead system. There had only ever been the choice to approach it or not. We had approached, we had learned. And the learning had cost us 11,400 hulls, and the soft gray world had not lost a single one, because the soft gray world had not sent a fleet to meet us at all. It had sent one warship that was exactly enough and stayed home and waited for us to teach ourselves the count. Dagon Sur ordered the swarm next, because the swarm was the answer to a single ship, the doctrine within the doctrine, the thing you sent when one hull was too fast or too armored for the line to pin. The swarm tenders cracked open along their spines and birthed their shoals. 100,000 drones, no larger than a cruise skiff each, mindless, expendable, designed to die in clouds so thick they smothered a target by sheer number. A single ship cannot kill 100,000 things at once. That was the law. That had always been the law. You could armor against a fleet. You could not armor against a sky that was made entirely of teeth. The shoals went out, 100,000 of them, and the dead system filled with a fog of small dark bodies converging on the one cold hull, and for the first time since the white seam opened, I let myself believe they denied my hold. Not the line, not the weight, but the swarm. The swarm was different. The swarm was the law of small numbers made into a weapon. You cannot subtract fast enough when there are 100,000 of us. The sundering line let the swarm come. It did not run. It did not sweep them with the white seam. It simply let the fog of drones close around it until the 1.5 kilometers of hull was wrapped in 100,000 small dark bodies. And the scope tenders cheered, actually cheered, a sound I had never heard on a muster bridge, because for one breath it looked as though the ship had been swallowed, as though the law of small numbers had held, as though weight in the form of count had finally found the answer. Then the human ship did the thing that I have spent every day since trying to forget and cannot. It breathed in. I do not have a better word. The hull did not fire. It did not sweep. The long white seam pulsed once, drawing inward, and the entire shoal, 100,000 drones, the law of small numbers, the doctrine within the doctrine, was drawn into that seam of light and unmade in a single indrawn instant. 100,000 small dark bodies vanishing the way the vanguard had vanished, the way the anchor flank had vanished, gone into the same dark, and the scope tenders cheered died in their throats, and the cold ship hung there, swarmless, scarless, and the woman's voice came across our own command band, our own private band, and she sounded only tired. "You keep sending me your doctrine," she said. "I've read your doctrine. We pulled it off the worlds you took. Line, weight, swarm, that's all you have, isn't it? 3 answers, and you've spent all 3, and I'm still here. Sundering line, the swarm is clear. Resume the line," and it resumed the line. The white seam swept and swept and swept, and the host died in clean, even passes. 200 ships, 400 ships, the great host of the outer reach, unmade not in the chaos of battle, but in the patient rhythm of a thing doing a job. And I logged each pass, because logging was my function, and a creature clings to its function when everything else is gone. 10,800, 10,200, 9,600. I logged the numbers, and my hand did not shake, and I do not know why it did not shake, except that there is a place past fear where the body simply continues, and I had gone to that place, and from that place I watched the reach end. Dagon Sir stopped giving orders. There were no orders left to give. He stood at the gallery glass with his 40 notches on his collar plate, and he watched the host he commanded subtracted from existence in even, rhythmic passes. And at some point he said very quietly, not to me, not to anyone, "It is not even trying to survive. It is only working. We are not its enemy. We are its task." That was the truest thing he ever said. And it was also the moment I understood the full shape of the wrongness, because he was right. The sundering line was not fighting for its life. There was no danger to its life. We had brought it nothing it needed to fear. It was simply processing the host the way I had once processed the rolls of conquered worlds, methodically, completely, with no malice and no mercy and no particular urgency, because the outcome was not in question and had never been in question, and the only variable was time. 9,000. 8,400. "Hail it," Dagon Sir said. "Open the band. I will speak to it." I opened the band. He spoke, and his voice had lost the amusement and lost the doctrine, and held only a thing I had never heard in a muster lord before, the thing the worlds we visited must have heard in their own leaders' voices when I read them the count. "This is Muster Lord Dagon Sir of the Outer Reach Concord," he said. "I yield. The host yields. We will fold home and we will not approach Earth. You have made your demonstration. There is no need to continue. Name your terms." The white seam swept again as he spoke. 8,100. "I offered you terms," the woman said. "In the dead system before you fired. Turn around, fold home, do not approach Earth. You declined. You fired on us with your full weight. You sent the swarm. That was your answer to our terms. So now there are no terms. Now there is only the count, the one you gave the herald to give my world. 12 days. You gave Earth 12 days to kneel or be ended. We told you we'd answer in 9. This is the answer, Muster Lord. You're 4 days into it. We have 5 left and we won't need them. You cannot." Dagon Sir's voice broke and reformed. "You will burn your own offer. We yield. A host that yields is not destroyed. That is the law, even our law. A yielded host is taken, not erased. You cannot erase a host that is yielded." "That's your law," the woman said. "We pulled that off your worlds too. The yielded host taken intact. The crews enrolled as clients. The doctrine spread to the next world by the survivors of the last. That's how 406 worlds became your hymn. You take the yielders so the yielders carry your count to the next ones. I've read it. And I'm telling you, Muster Lord, we are not going to take you. We are not going to enroll your crews. We are not going to let one hull of this host fold home to carry your count to a single other world. The count ends here. The count ends with the ship that gave it. The seam swept. 7,800. 7,200. Why, Daganser said, and it was barely a word. Why all of it? We have yielded. Why not spare what yields? And the woman's voice, tired, flat, without cruelty and without warmth, said the thing that I carried home and that I will carry to the end of whatever is left of me. Because you would have spared us, she said, if we had knelt. If Earth had dismantled its fleets and given you the orbital yards and put your prefect in our highest seat, you would have spared us and enrolled us, and 100 years from now, Earth would have been a client world reading your count to the next soft world over. You spare the ones who kneel because the ones who kneel become your weight. We are not going to be your weight, and we are not going to leave you alive to make weight of anyone else. That's not cruelty, Muster Lord. That's arithmetic. You taught us. We learned. Sundering line, resume. And the white seam swept, and 7,200 became 6,600, and the dead system filled with the slow, patient unmaking of the largest host the Reach had ever raised, and I logged it, ship by ship. All the way down, Dogon Sir tried to run after that, and I do not blame him. Because there is a point at which yielding has failed, and the only doctrine left is the oldest one of all, the one that precedes all the others, the one written into the meat of every living thing. Flee, he ordered the fold. The surviving host, 6,000 and falling, began to spool its jump fields, to bend the dark, to claw its way out of the dead system and back toward the worlds of the Reach where the count still meant something, and one ship was still impossible. 6,000 jump fields lit at once, the largest single fold ever attempted, the host tearing at the fabric of the system to get away from the cold, patient thing in its center. The sundering line let the first few go. I logged that too, and at the time I did not understand it, and I marked it as a mercy. The first mercy of the whole engagement, a dozen hulls, folding out clean, escaping into the dark, carrying word home. I thought the human ship had reached the end of its reach. I thought for one foolish breath that some of us would live. Then I understood. It had not let them go. It had let them spool. Because a ship cannot fold and fire at once, the jump field eats every system the hull has, and a host of 6,000 spooling its fields all at once was a host of 6,000 that could not defend itself, could not maneuver, could not do anything but hold station and tear at the dark and prey. The human ship had not shown mercy. It had waited for us to make ourselves still. And then the white seam opened wider than it had opened all day, wider than the 1.5 kilometers of hull should have allowed, as though the seam were not a part of the ship but a door in the ship to somewhere the ship merely carried. And the long, low note sounded across every band at once, and the spooling host, 6,000 hulls, every field lit, every system committed to the fold, every defense dark, was unmade in a single sustained breath that lasted by the log 11 seconds. 11 seconds. When it ended, the dead system was nearly empty. The charts read 411 surviving hulls out of 11,400. The ones too far back in the formation, the ones the seam had not yet reached, the rear anchors and the tenders and the flag anchor I stood aboard, kept alive. I understood now, not by chance and not by mercy, but by selection, because the human ship was not killing at random. It was working through the host in order, front to back, the way I work through a roll of names, and the 411 of us at the back were simply the names it had not yet reached. Dagon Sir stood at the gallery glass and did not order anything, because there was nothing to order. 6,000 ships had spooled their fields to flee, and the fields had been the death of them. The host of the outer reach, 11,400 strong, the weather, the tide, the end of a season, was 411 frightened hulls in a dead system around one cold ship that had not taken a single new scar. The woman's voice came again. She did not sound triumphant. In 40 years of reading counts to worlds, I had never once heard a conqueror sound the way she sounded, and it took me the rest of my life to find the word for it, and the word is sorrow. She sounded sorry, not for us, for the work. 411, she said. She had been counting too. Of course she had been counting too. That's the flag anchor and the rear elements. The herald ship. Voskareth, are you aboard the flag anchor? You read me the count. Answer. The whole bridge turned to look at me. Dagon Sir turned to look at me. I, third herald of the outer reach, the creature whose function was to speak, found that my voice still worked, and I opened the band, and I answered the thing that had unmade my world's host in a single afternoon. I am aboard, I said. I am Voskareth. I read you the count. I logged your words, and I did not believe them. I am logging now, and I believe everything. Good, she said. Then you're the one I need. Listen carefully, Herald, because this part is for you, and it's the only part that matters, and I'm only going to say it once. I listened. The 411 of us, the last of the host, hung in the dead dark and listened, because there was nothing else in the universe to do. I'm going to let your ship live, she said. Yours and the three nearest it, 4 hulls, the flag anchor and 3 rear anchors. The rest of the 411, no. But your 4, yes. And I'm going to tell you why, because the why is the whole point. And if you don't carry the why home, then I've wasted an afternoon and 11,000 crews for nothing, and I don't intend to have wasted them. Dagon Sir made a sound beside me, a low, broken sound. He understood before I did. He had 40 notches on his collar, and he understood, the way a conqueror understands the moment he becomes a survivor, that we were not being spared. We were being given a function. We were being made into the thing I had always been, a herald, a carrier of the count. You will fold home, the woman said, your 4 ships. You will go to the high muster of the outer reach, to whatever seat sits highest in the concord that ordered Earth to kneel, and you will read them a new count, Herald, not mine, yours. You will tell them what you saw in this dead system. You will tell them the host. You will tell them 11,400, and you will tell them 411, and then you will tell them 4. You will tell them the align did nothing, the weight did nothing, the swarm did nothing, the yield did nothing, the flight did nothing. You will tell them there was one ship and it had no name they could pronounce, and it processed the largest muster the Reach ever raised the way a clerk processes a list, and it was never once in danger, and it was never once in a hurry. The scene dimmed. The cold ship hung in the dark, patient, done with its work, waiting only for me to understand my new function. And then she said, you will read them the terms. The same terms I read you, turn around. Do not approach Earth. Not now, not in 100 years, not in 19,000. The Reach will leave Earth alone, and Earth will leave the Reach alone, and the count that you carried to my world for 40 years will never be carried to another world again. Those are the terms. There's no negotiation and no extension. You have seen what the muster's full weight buys against one of our ships. Carry that home, Herald. That's your count now. You read it to 406 worlds. Now read it to the one that sent you. I did not believe her even then. That is the shameful truth. And I record it because a herald records the truth or he is nothing. 400 of us still lived in that dead system, and the cold ship had said it would spare 4, and some small surviving piece of the doctrine inside me said, a ship cannot do all it has done and then be tired. There is a limit. Everything has a limit. She is bluffing now to seem merciful. She has spent her weapon. The 400 can rush her while she is empty. That was the doctrine speaking, the last living scrap of it, and I knew even as I thought it that the doctrine had been wrong about every other thing that afternoon, and still I could not silence it. Because a creature does not give up the thing that shaped his whole life in a single afternoon, not even when the afternoon has unmade 11,000 hulls in front of his eyes. The mind clings. The mind says, surely not this too. Surely there is a floor under us somewhere. Surely the fall ends. Dagon Sir did not have that piece left. The afternoon had burned it out of him. But the rear anchor captain still had it. The same doctrine I had. The same certainty that nothing is without a limit. And 3 of them broke formation without orders and drove their hulls at the sundering line at full burn. The last charge of the Outer Reach Concord, 3 line anchors against 1 cold ship, because they could not make themselves believe what their own eyes had logged. I want to tell you that the human ship struggled with them, that after 11,000 hulls there was at last a flicker, a strain, a moment when the cold thing in the dark had to reach for something to answer the last 3. There was not. The seam swept once, almost absently, the way you brush away a thing that has landed on you while you are thinking of something else. And the 3 rear anchors were gone, unmade, subtracted, and the cold ship had not even turned to face them. It had unmade them across its own shoulder, as an afterthought, while waiting for me. That was the moment the doctrine finally died in me. Not the vanguard, not the weight, not the swarm, not the fold. The afterthought. The 3 last brave hulls of the Reach erased without the ship troubling to look, and the woman's voice, only a little sharper now, saying, don't do that again. I told you 4. I meant 4. Every time you test the count gets smaller. You're at 408. Hold formation and you stay there. Charge again and you won't. Herald, hold your people. They're spending their lives proving a thing you already know. I held them. Whatever a herald's voice is worth, I spent all of it, and the 408 surviving hulls held station in the dead dark, while the cold ship decided which 4 would live. And I understood that this too was part of the demonstration. That we were being made to choose nothing, to do nothing, to hang helpless in the place where our weight had meant everything an hour ago and meant nothing now, so that we would carry home not just the count but the helplessness, the specific texture of being 11,000 and being weather, and then being 408 things waiting to learn whether we were on the list. The seam swept a final time, long, even, unhurried. 404 lines vanished from the ledger, and then it stopped, and the dead system held 4 ships of the Outer Reach Concord, the flag anchor, where I stood, and 3 rear anchors, and 1 cold-weathered hull 1.5 kilometers down the keel, scarred only by its own age and the old salvage marks of a working life, unwounded, unhurried, done. 4, the woman said. As I said, Voskareth, your 4 ships are released. Your fold fields are the only ones I'll let light in this system. Spool them. Go home. Carry the count. I should have spooled and gone. Any sensible creature would have. But I was a herald, and a herald's whole function is the asking and answering of the count. And there was a question in me that had been growing since the white seam first opened, and I could not fold without asking it. Because if I folded without asking it, I would carry home only numbers, and numbers were not the count. The count was the meaning of the numbers, and I did not yet have the meaning. Sundering line, I said, before I fold. 1 question. You will grant a herald 1 question. It is our oldest courtesy, and I am asking it. A pause, then ask. You let us fire on you, I said, the full weight of the host. 11,100 guns, and you stood in it and let it break against you and did nothing until it was spent. Why, you could have ended us before we fired. You ended the vanguard before they reached you. Why let the host spend its weight if the weight could not touch you? Why give us the demonstration of our own helplessness when you did not need it to win? You had already won. Why? The pause this time was longer. When the woman answered, her voice had changed again, and I understood that I had asked the right question, the question she had been waiting through the whole afternoon for someone in the host to be left alive enough to ask. Because winning was never the point, Herald, she said. If winning were the point, I'd have ended you the way I ended the vanguard, all at once. Before you knew I was there, I could have. The ship can reach the whole host in a single working. Front to back, all 11,000 in one breath. I held it to passes so you'd have time. Time to fire your weight and watch it fail. Time to send your swarm and watch it fail. Time to yield and learn that yielding is just another way you make weight of the worlds you take. Time to run and learn that running into a fold makes you still, and still is when you die. I gave you the whole afternoon, Herald, and I spent 11,000 crews to do it. And I will carry that spending for the rest of my life because they were alive and now they are not, and I am the one who unmade them. But I did it on purpose, and I did it slow, and I did it in front of you for one reason. The cold ship's seam pulsed, once dim, almost gentle, so that when you go home and they ask you whether it was luck, she said, you can tell them no. Whether it was a trick, a single weapon, a thing that could be answered if they only built it bigger or sent more, you can tell them no. You watched, you logged. You saw the line do nothing, the weight do nothing, the swarm do nothing, the yield do no. We folded home in silence. 4 ships where 11,400 had set out, and the whole long fold I stood at the gallery glass of the flag anchor and watched the dead system fall away behind us. And the last thing I saw before the dark took it was the cold-weathered hull of the sundering line, holding station, alone, exactly where it had been waiting when we arrived, exactly as it would wait for anything else the galaxy was foolish enough to send down the lane toward Earth. Dagon Sir did not speak for the entire fold. He stood with his 40 notches on his collar plate and his eyes on nothing. And somewhere in that silence the muster lord who had ended 40 worlds became simply an old creature who had survived the end of his own. And when we came out of the fold above the throne world of the Concord, above Hreth where we had mustered, above the deepest yards of the Reach, he turned to me and said the only thing he said the whole way home. You will read the count, he said. Not me, you are the herald. I commanded the host that died. They will not hear it from me. They will hear excuses and they will be right. They will hear it from you, who logged every number, who believed nothing and now believes everything. Read it true, Voskareth. Read it exactly. If you soften it, you kill the next host, and the one after that, until there is no Reach left to read, counts to. Read it true. And I read it true. I stood before the high muster of the Outer Reach Concord, in the great chamber, where for 19,000 years the rolls of conquered worlds had been entered and the counts dispatched, where 406 submissions were carved into the walls like a hymn, and I read them the count. I did not soften it. I had softened nothing in 40 years, and I did not begin with the largest count of my life. I told them 11,400. I let the number sit. I watched it land on the high muster the way I had watched my own counts land on 100 worlds, the certainty leaving the room degree by degree. I told them 411. I told them 4. I told them the line did nothing, and the weight did nothing, and the swarm did nothing, and the yield did nothing, and the flight did nothing. I told them about the 3 brave hulls erased across the cold ship's shoulder while it waited to speak to me. I told them the afternoon was slow on purpose, and I told them why, and I watched the why do to the high muster what it had done to me in the dead. System take the hope out, hull by hull, leaving nothing behind it but the arithmetic. And then I read them the terms. Turn around. Do not approach Earth, not now, not in 100 years, not in 19,000. Leave the soft gray world alone, and the count that the Reach had carried to 406 worlds would never be carried to a 407th. The high muster was silent for a long time. Then the eldest of them, a creature older than my bloodline, with the rolls of 1,000 years behind her, asked me the question that the doctrine demands, the question I had known she would ask, the last gasp of 19,000 years of wait. Herald, she said, you say one ship. You say it processed the host without strain, without hurry, without danger. You say the wait did nothing. But you say also that it spared 4 hulls. A thing that spares is a thing with a limit. If we built the host, larger, 20,000 hulls, 30,000, every yard of the Reach turned to war for a generation, would the count not finally turn? Is there not a number, Herald, large enough? There is always a number large enough. That is the Reach. That is 19,000 years. And I gave her the answer the woman had given me, the answer I had folded home across the dark to deliver, the answer that ended the doctrine that had built 406 worlds into a hymn. There is no number, I said. I asked the same question with my eyes, watching it work, and the ship answered it before I could speak it. It told me it could have reached the whole host in a single breath, front to back, all 11,000 at once. It did not. It chose to go slow. The limit you are hoping for, eldest, the limit that spared 4 hulls, was not the ship's limit. It was the ship's mercy. There is a difference, and the difference is the whole of the count. And if you cannot hear the difference, then you will build your 30,000 hulls, and you will send them down the lane toward Earth, and the ship will reach all 30,000 in one breath, because there will be no herald it needs to leave alive, no count it needs carried, nothing it wants from you but your absence. The 4 hulls lived because it wanted a witness. Send a larger host and it will want nothing, and wanting nothing it will be quick. The mercy is the slowness. Quick is what it does when mercy is over. Do not go looking for the number, eldest. The number is not on our side of the ledger. It never was. We only never met the thing that could read the ledger faster than we could fill it. The eldest looked at me for a long time, the way I had once looked at a tired-eyed envoy in a gray uniform, and I watched her do the arithmetic. The real arithmetic. The arithmetic that has nothing to do with how many hulls you can build, and everything to do with what one of theirs can unmake. And I watched the certainty go out of the oldest creature in the Reach, the way it had gone out of 11,000 crews in a dead system. Enter it in the rolls, she said at last, very quietly, not as a submission. We have no word for what this is. We have only ever carved submissions. Enter it as the count we received, the one world we will not approach. Strike the lane to Earth from the charts. Let no herald carry the count down it again. And it was done. The wall of the great chamber, where 406 submissions were carved like a hymn, received its 407th entry, and it was not a submission, and it was the only entry in 19,000 years that the Reach carved in honor of a count it had received instead of given. I thought that was the end of the count. I was wrong about that too, and I should have learned by then to stop expecting endings, because the doctrine does not die in a single chamber. It dies in pieces, and each piece costs another host, and there were creatures in the Reach who had not stood in the dead system, who had not watched the weight break against one hull, who heard my count and did the only thing a believer can do when the foundation of his belief is taken from him. They decided I was lying. The challenge came from the Iron Quorum, the war caste that had built the muster's yards for 1,000 years and could not survive in a galaxy where their weight meant nothing. They could not. A thing cannot accept its own irrelevance. They went to the high muster, and they said the Herald Vos Kareth had been broken by the dead system, that fear had unmade his judgment the way the white seam had unmade the host, that no single hull could do what I claimed, that I had perhaps seen a weapon, a one-time weapon, a trick the humans had spent and could not spend again, and they asked for the second host. The high muster denied them. The eldest had carved the count into the wall and meant it, but the Iron Quorum did not need permission to die. They needed only their own yards, and their own hulls, and their own certainty, and they had all 3. They gathered 9,000 ships from the Warcasty's private reserve, 9,000, a host nearly the size of the one that had died, and they did not announce it because they did not want the eldest to stop them, and they folded for the lane to Earth that had been struck from the charts. I learned of it too late to stop it. I learned of it the way I learned everything now, as a herald, by the numbers moving where numbers should not move, and when I understood what the Iron Quorum had done, I went to the flag anchor, The same hull that had carried me home, and I had it folded after them, because I could not stop the second host, but I could witness it. And a herald who does not witness is nothing, and I had decided in the great chamber that I would never again carry home a count I had not seen with my own eyes. We came out of the fold at Marin's lantern, the dead system, the same staging point, and the Iron Quorum's 9,000 hulls were already there, dressing their lines, and the cold-weathered ship was already waiting, exactly where it had been, exactly where it would always be, the sundering line, 1.5 kilometers of patient iron between the host and the soft gray world, and I opened the band and I heard the woman's voice, the same tired voice, and she was speaking to the Iron Quorum the way she had spoken to us. "Concord host," she said. "This is the Terran ship sundering line. You came down a lane that was struck from your own charts. A herald named Vas Kareth carried you the count and you decided he lied. He didn't lie. Turn around. Fold home. Do not approach Earth." This is the only time I will say it, and I am saying it slower than I said it to the first host, because I am tired of saying it, and I would like very much for it to be the last time. After this, I stop talking and the ship starts working. The Iron Quorum laughed. Of course they laughed. They had not stood in the dead system. They had only heard a herald's broken count, and a herald's count is words, and words are not the same as watching 9,000 of your kind reach for a thing they cannot touch. They laughed, and their quorum master, a creature who had built 1,000 years of yards and could not imagine a galaxy that did not need them, opened the band and said the thing that every host says, the thing I had heard the first host say, the thing that is the last sentence of the doctrine before the doctrine ends. "We are 9,000, he said. You are one. The herald's count is the count of a coward. Hold your station, human, and we will take your ship apart and carry it to the yards and learn what trick let it fool, one broken herald, and then we will fold down your struck lane and we will teach your soft gray world the count it was always owed." "No," the woman said, "you won't. Vas Kareth, are you there? I can see 4 hulls at the rear that aren't part of the quorum's formation. The flag anchor. You came back." "I came back," I said. "I came to witness. I could not stop them. I am sorry." I read the count true and they decided the truth was fear. "They always do," she said, and there was the sorrow again, deeper now. "Pull your 4 hulls back, Herald. Back to the system's edge. I don't want you in the working. You've carried enough. Watch from the edge, and carry this one home too, because the Iron Quorum is going to make me prove the count a second time, and I'd hoped never to prove it twice." I pulled my 4 hulls to the edge, and I watched the sundering line prove the count a second time. It was faster the second time. That was the thing I had not expected, and the thing that taught me the last and worst lesson of the count, the one even the woman had warned me of in the dead system. The slowness was the mercy, and the mercy was for the witness, and the Iron Quorum had brought no one the ship needed to teach. They had brought only hulls, and so the ship did not teach them. It simply worked, and it worked quick, because quick is what it does when mercy is over. The white seam opened along the 1.5 kilometers of the cold hull, and it did not open in passes this time. It opened all at once, the whole length of it, wider than I had seen it open even at the end of the first host, and the long, low note sounded across every band, and it did not stop to let the Iron Quorum fire. It did not let them spend their weight. It did not let them send a swarm or yield or run. It did not give them the afternoon. The first host had been given the afternoon so that I could carry the Y home. The Iron Quorum had refused the Y, and so the ship took back the afternoon, 9,000 hulls. One breath I timed it, because timing was my function, and the breath lasted 9 seconds, 1 second for each 1,000, and at the end of the 9 seconds the dead system held my 4 hulls at its edge, and one cold, weathered ship at its center, and nothing else at all. No vanguard erased and logged, no anchor flank subtracted, no swarm drawn in and unmade, no yield, no flight, no 3 brave hulls across the shoulder. Just 9,000 hulls of the Iron Quorum. The warcast that had built the Reach's weight for 1,000 years, gone between one breath and the next, with no demonstration, because a demonstration is a kindness, and the ship had no kindness left to spend on creatures who had thrown the first kindness back. The woman's voice came across the band, and it was not tired now. It was something past tired, something I had no word for in any cant I knew. The voice of a creature who has just done a thing she did not want to do, because the thing she did not want to do was made necessary by creatures who would not listen. 9 seconds, she said. Vas Kareth, log it, 9,009 seconds. The first host got an afternoon and 4 survivors because I needed you to carry the Y. The Iron Quorum got 9 seconds and no survivors because they'd already heard the Y and called it cowardice. There's your difference, Herald. There's the whole of it. The slowness was never weakness, and it was never a limit. It was a message, and a message only works if someone's left to read it. The Iron Quorum didn't want to read, so they didn't get the slow version. Carry that home, too. Carry it louder than the first one. I had thought, watching the first host die across a whole slow afternoon, that I had seen the worst a thing could do. I had not. The afternoon had been terrible because it was slow, because I had time to count each pass and log each vanishing and feel the certainty leave the host degree by degree. The 9 seconds were worse, and they were worse precisely because there was no time to feel anything at all. 9,000 hulls of the iron quorum dressed their lines, and the seam opened its full length, and then there was a single low note that did not rise and did not fall, and the lines were simply not there, and my mind had not finished registering that the working had begun before it was already over. There was no degree by degree. There was no leaving of certainty. There was a host, and then there was no host, and the gap between the two was so small that some part of me kept waiting, at the system's edge, for the rest of the iron quorum to bloom back into being, the way you keep reaching for a step that it is not there. It never bloomed back. 9,000 crews had existed and then had not, in a span shorter than the breath I am taking to tell you of it, and I understood that the afternoon had been the merciful version, the version made for a witness, and that this absence with no slowness in it, this subtraction too fast to grieve in the moment of its happening, this was the thing the ship did when it was done being kind. I folded home a second time, 4 hulls where 9,000 had set out, and this time the 4 were only my 4, the witnesses, because the iron quorum had left none of its own, and I stood before the high muster a second time, and this time the chamber was full, because word of the iron quorum's vanishing had run ahead of me, and the whole reach wanted to hear the herald who kept coming home from the dead system while the host did not. I read them the second count, 9,000, 9 seconds, no survivors but the witnesses. And I read them the difference the woman had given me, the difference between the afternoon and the 9 seconds, the difference between mercy and absence, and I told them what it meant, and this time no one asked me whether there was a number large enough. The iron quorum had been the number large enough. The iron quorum had been 9,000 hulls of the finest the reach could build, and they had bought 9 seconds, and there was no one left in the great chamber who needed the arithmetic explained. The eldest rose. She was older than my bloodline, and she had carved the first count into the wall with her own authority and watched the iron quorum spit on it, and now she stood before the full reach and did the thing that no creature of the Concord had done in 19,000 years. She struck the doctrine. "Hear the count," she said, and her voice carried to every corner of the chamber where 406 submissions were, carved like a hymn. For 19,000 years we have ruled by weight. We have taught every world the same lesson, that there is no skill that beats enough, no hull that survives everything, no fleet that stands against the muster's full count. We taught it because it was true. It is no longer true. It was made untrue in a dead system by a single ship that read our weight the way we read a roll of names, and it has been proven untrue twice, and the second proving cost the iron quorum 9,000 hulls in 9 seconds. The doctrine is ended, not amended, ended. We will build no third host for the soft gray world. We will strike its lane from every chart in the reach, and we will enter into the rolls, beside the count we received, this command, that no herald, no caste, no quorum, no creature of the Concord shall approach Earth again. Not in our lifetimes, not in our children's, not while the reach endures. The ship in the dead system gave us terms. We accept them. The reach kneels. After 406 worlds, the reach learns at last what it taught, and the reach kneels to the one world it could not teach. The reach knelt, and I thought again that the count was finished and I was wrong again, but this time the wrongness was a different shape, and it took me years to see it. And when I saw it, I understood that the cold ship in the dead system had done something larger than end a host. It had ended a thing that the host was only a part of. It had ended the certainty itself, and certainty does not stay inside one empire. Certainty leaks. The reach did not rule alone. We were the largest power in the outer reach, 406 worlds, the weight that made the smaller powers behave. The choir of Vale, the long stillness, the threshold combine, they were lesser empires, dozens of worlds each, and for 1,000 years they had kept their distance from our lanes because they did the arithmetic, and the arithmetic said the reach was too heavy to challenge. Our weight kept the peace of the outer reach, the cold peace of a thing too large to fight. And now the whole outer reach had watched the reach kneel. They knew. Everyone knew. The dead system had not been quiet. 8 hulls had folded out across the 2 provings, the survivors I had held formation over, and the few the iron quorum's vanishing had scattered, and they had carried the count to their own people, and the count had spread the way the cold goes through a hull when the heat dies, room by room, certainty by certainty. The galaxy had learned that the heaviest power in the reach had knelt to a single ship, and the galaxy had drawn the only conclusion a galaxy can draw from such a thing. If the reach could be made to kneel, the reach was no longer the weight that kept the peace. The Choir of Vale moved first. They were an old jealous empire, 40 worlds, and they had hated the Reach's weight for 1,000 years, and now they saw the weight kneel, and they thought, exactly as the Iron Quorum had thought, exactly as I had once thought, exactly as every creature thinks who has not stood in the dead system, that a thing which can be beaten by one ship can be beaten by them. They did not understand that the ship had not beaten the Reach. The ship had simply declined to let the Reach pass. There is a difference, and it is the same difference as the one between the afternoon and the 9 seconds, and the Choir of Vale did not know it, and so they came to take the lanes the Reach had abandoned, and they came for the soft gray world, because the soft gray world was the thing that had broken the Reach, and an empire that takes the thing that broke its rival believes it has taken the rival's place. They sent their own host down the struck lane, 6,000 hulls, and I, Voskareth, third herald of a Reach that no longer carried counts, asked the high muster for the flag anchor one last time, and I folded for the dead system because I knew what waited there, and I knew the Choir of Vale did not. And a herald who knows what waits and does not witness is a herald who has forgotten his function. The sundering line was there. Of course it was there. It was always there. 1.5 kilometers of patient weathered iron between the lane and the soft gray world, exactly where it had waited for my host, exactly where it had waited for the Iron Quorum, exactly where it would wait for the Choir of Vale, and for anything else the galaxy was foolish enough to send. I had begun to understand by then that the ship was not defending Earth the way a guard defends a door. It was simply the consequence of approaching Earth, the same way falling is the consequence of stepping off a height, not a choice the ship made each time, but a law the ship was, a law that had been placed in the dead system and would remain there, patient, until the lane was no longer used. I did not let the Choir of Vale blunder in blind. I had carried 2 counts home and watched a third host gather, and I had learned the only thing a herald can give that is worth giving. I opened the band before the working began, and I spoke to the Choir of Vale's commander myself, herald to host, the way the woman had once spoken to me. Choir of Vale, I said, this is Voskareth of the Outer Reach Concord. I am the herald who carried the count home twice. I am at the system's edge where the ship has allowed me to stand and witness, and I am going to tell you what waits for you, and you are going to call it cowardice, because that is what every host calls the count before the count is proven on its hulls. I carried the Reach down this lane with 11,400 ships. 4 came home. The Iron Quorum came with 9,000. None came home. Only the witnesses. The ship between you and the soft gray world is one hull, and it has never once been in danger, and it has never once been in a hurry except the one time a host refused to listen, and the hurry cost them 9,000 hulls in 9 seconds. Turn around, Choir of Vale. Fold home. The Reach knelt. There is no shame in kneeling to this. There is only the count, and the count is not on your side of the ledger, and it never will be. The Choir of Vale's commander listened, and then he did what I knew he would do, because I had done it myself in a gray receiving hall to a tired-eyed envoy I did not believe. He thanked me for my cowardice, and he gave the order to advance. And the woman's voice, the same tired voice, older now, more tired, came across the band, and she said, Herald, you tried. I heard you try. Thank you for trying. Pull back to the edge. They've made their choice. They always make their choice. Sundering line, the Choir of Vale has declined the count. Begin. I pulled back to the edge, and I watched the ship prove the count a third time, and it was the 9 seconds again, because the Choir of Vale had heard the why and called it cowardice, and the ship had no slowness left to spend on creatures who would not listen. 6,000 hulls, 6 seconds. The dead system swept clean, and the cold-weathered ship hanging exactly where it had always hung, unwounded, unhurried, and the soft gray world beyond it sleeping under a sky it would never need to look at, because the law and the dead system looked at the sky for it. I folded home with the count of the Choir of Vale, and I read it to a chamber that no longer needed to hear it, and after that the Outer Reach stopped sending hosts down the struck lane, not because anyone forbade it. The forbidding had stopped mattering. They stopped because the count had finally finished its work. It had moved from the rolls into the meat of every creature in the Outer Reach, the way the Reach's own count had once lived in the meat of the worlds we visited. And a count that lives in the meat does not need to be forbidden. It is simply known. The soft gray world is not approached. The lane is not used. The ship is not tested. These were no longer commands. They had become the shape of the galaxy, the way the Reach's weight had once been the shape of it, and the shape had changed. And a single weathered hull 1.5 kilometers down the keel had changed it. And I had watched, and I had logged, and I had carried it home 3 times until home itself learned what I had learned in the dead system on the first afternoon. I am old now, by the measure of my kind, and I have read no count in years, because there are no counts left for me to carry. The Reach does not conquer worlds anymore. It cannot. A thing that has knelt cannot make others kneel. The worlds we once visited have heard by now what happened in the dead system, and they no longer do the arithmetic that kept them quiet, because the arithmetic changed, and they know it changed. And a herald who arrives at a world with a count in his mouth would be laughed off the receiving floor. The weight is gone. The hymn on the chamber wall is just carving now, a record of a thing the reach used to be. I have had years to sit with the why, the thing the woman gave me in the dead system on the first afternoon, the thing she spent 11,000 crews to make me carry, and I have turned it over so many times that I have worn it smooth, and I will tell you the shape it is worn down to, because it is the only thing I have left that is worth the telling. I used to believe that weight was the world. That enough of anything beat any amount of anything else. 11,400 against one, there was no skill, no courage, no weapon that closed that gap, because the gap was not a thing skill could close. The gap was the whole of our doctrine and the whole of our peace and the whole of my 40 years. And the cold ship in the dead system did not close the gap. That is the thing I understand now that I did not understand then. It did not fight across the gap and win. It revealed that the gap had never been the thing that mattered. The gap was a story the reach told itself. 11,400 ships worth of story, and the ship did not defeat the story. It simply was a thing the story did not account for, and the story broke against it, the way the host's full weight broke against the 1.5 kilometers of weathered hull and did nothing, and what was left after the story broke was the arithmetic the story had been hiding all along. That there are things in the galaxy which do not care how much of you there is, because the amount of you was never the variable. We thought we were the heavy thing, we were only the large thing. And large is not heavy when the other side can lift you 1,000 at a breath. I went back once. After the choir of Veil, after the outer reach reshaped itself around the count, after the years had made me too old to carry anything but my own weight, I took the flag anchor. They let me keep it. The old herald and his one hull, a courtesy to the creature who had carried the count home 3 times, and I folded for the dead system one last time, and I did not bring a host, and I did not bring a count, and I did not approach Earth. I held at the system's edge, where the ship had let me witness, and I opened the band and I asked for the woman. She answered, older. Her voice had aged the way mine had aged, the way a thing ages that has carried a heavy load for a long time, and I understood hearing it, that the 11,000 crews she had spent on my afternoon had cost her exactly what she said they would, that she had carried them every day since the way I had carried the count, that the ship's mercy and the ship's burden were the same weight, and she had borne both. Herald, she said, you came back, no host, good, why? To ask you a thing, I said, the last thing. I am old and I will read no more counts, and I would like to fold home knowing it. When you let my fourholes live, you said you needed a witness. You said the slowness was a message, and a message needs a reader. And I have carried the message, and I have read it to the reach and watched the reach kneel, and I have read it to the choir of Veil and watched the dead system sweep clean, and the count has done its work, and the galaxy has reshaped itself around it. So my question is this, was it worth it? The 11,000 crews, the afternoon, the spending. You could have ended my host in a single breath, front to back, with no witness and no message and no cost to your own meat. You chose the slow way, and the slow way cost you something I can hear in your voice even now. Was it worth it to make me carry the why home, instead of simply ending us and being done? The cold ship hung in the dark, patient, unwounded, the same 1.5 kilometers of weathered iron that had waited for 3 hosts, and the woman was quiet, for a long time, the longest she had ever been quiet, and when she answered her voice was the most tired I had ever heard it, and also somehow the most certain. If I'd ended your host in a breath and let no one carry it home, she said, I'd have had to do it again and again and again. Every host the reach sent, every host the choir of Veil sent, every host every jealous little empire in the outer reach sent down this lane forever, because none of them would ever have known. They'd have folded in confident and folded out dead, and the next one would have come just as confident, because the dead don't carry counts, Herald. Only the living carry counts. I spent 11,000 crews on one slow afternoon, so that I would not have to spend 9,000 more on every afternoon after it. The slowness wasn't mercy for your host. The slowness was for the soft gray world behind me, so that fewer of you would have to die to keep it safe, because every one of you I let carry the count home is a host that never comes, and a host that never comes is a host I never have to unmake. I went slow once, so I could go still forever. That was the arithmetic, Herald. You asked me the right question in the dead system the first time, and you've asked it again now, and the answer is the same.
Yes.
It was worth it. Ask the worlds the reach didn't conquer this past decade whether it was worth it. They're alive because you carried the why. I asked her one more thing, before I folded home for the last time, because I had carried the count for so long that I had never once asked the question a herald should ask first. The question I had not asked in a gray receiving hall 40 years before when I read the count to a tired-eyed envoy and did not believe a word of it. "What is it?" I said. "The ship, the sundering line. I have logged it 3 times and I do not know what I logged. A weapon, a vessel, a thing your world built, or a thing your world found. I have carried its work across the galaxy and I do not know what it is. Tell me so I can fold home knowing the one thing I never knew." And the woman laughed softly, the first time I had ever heard her laugh, and it was not the dry clicking contempt of my own kind. It was something warmer and sadder than that. "That's the thing your whole reach never understood," she said. "You kept scanning it. You kept trying to find the trick, the weapon, the one impossible thing that let one hull beat 11,000. The Iron Quorum died still believing there was a trick to find and carry to the yards. But there's no trick, Herald. There's no secret weapon. The Sundering Line is a warship. That's all. It's a warship my world built. The way your world built its line dreadnoughts and its anchor ships and its swarm tenders. We built a warship. The difference is only this. Your world built ships to be heavy, to win by weight, because weight was the only thing your doctrine believed in. We built a ship to be exactly enough. Not heavy, enough. Enough to be a law instead of a contender. Enough that the gap between 1 and 11,000 simply stopped on being a gap that mattered. You spent 19,000 years making your ships larger. We spent hours making one ship correct, and a correct ship doesn't need to be large. It only needs to be there. "A warship," I said. "Only a warship." "Only a warship," she said, "but built by a world you came to make kneel. You looked at the soft gray world and you saw something to conquer. You read it a count, 12 days. And you never asked the only question that mattered, the question your whole doctrine made you too heavy to ask. What does a world like that build, when it has spent its whole history deciding it will never kneel to anyone? It builds the Sundering Line, Herald. It builds a ship that is exactly enough, and it parks it in the dead system on the lane to its home, and it waits. We weren't hiding from your count. We answered it in 9 days, just like I told you we would, the day you read it to me and wrote down my words and didn't believe them. The ship was already built. The ship was already waiting. All we ever did was wait for you to come down the lane and find out what the soft gray world had been building while you were busy counting it. I folded home. I did not approach Earth. No one approaches Earth. The lane is struck from every chart in the outer reach, and the chart is only a courtesy now, because no creature in the galaxy needs a chart to tell it the thing every creature already knows in its meat. There is a dead system on the way to a soft gray world, and 1.5 kilometers of patient-weathered iron waits in it. And it is not heavy, and it is not large, and it does not pose, and it does not hurry, and it is exactly enough, and it will be there long after the reach is dust, because it does not need to win. It only needs to be there. I am the last herald of a reach that carried counts to 406 worlds, and knelt to the 407th, and I have only one count left to read, and I am reading it to you now. Whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever lane you are thinking of sending your host down, here it is. Here is the whole of it. Here is the count I carried home 3 times across the dark, the count that ended 19,000 years of wait, the count the soft gray world gave me to give to anyone foolish enough to do the arithmetic the way the Reach once did. We were 11,400. We sent the largest host the Reach ever raised against one ship that would not let us pass. We fired our full weight on it and it stood. We sent 100,000 drones and it breathed them in. We yielded and learned that yielding only made us wait for the next world. We ran and learned that running is when you die. We sent a second host of 9,000 and it bought 9 seconds. We sent a third and it bought 6. And 4 of us came home from the first and only the witnesses from the rest. And we knelt, the Reach knelt, the heaviest power in the outer reach knelt, to a single weathered hull that never took a new scar because the ship was not heavy and not large. It was only correct. It was only exactly enough. It was only a warship built by a world that decided, before any of us ever found it, that it would never kneel. So do your arithmetic. Build your 30,000 hulls. Raise your host larger than the Reach ever dreamed. And remember, when you have done all of it, when your weight fills the sky of your staging world from edge to edge, and you feel the old certainty settle into your bones like warmth, there is no number large enough. The number was never on your side of the ledger. It never was. You will only ever be the large thing, and large is not heavy, and somewhere down the lane there is a warship that is exactly enough, waiting in the dark, in no hurry at all, for you to come and find out what the soft gray world built while you were busy counting it. Turn around. Fold home. Do not approach Earth. I have carried the count 3 times, and I will not carry it again. And that is the last word of the last herald of the outer reach. The count is not on our side of the ledger. It never was. We only never met the thing that could read the ledger faster than we could fill it. We have met it now. Turn around.